Hi, this is Stephen, and welcome to Exploring Accessibility. If you have just started learning about accessibility, you may have heard of ARIA. But what is ARIA and how can you use it? ARIA, short for Accessible Rich Internet Applications, is a system you can use to make your websites and apps more accessible and usable by people using assistive technologies like screen readers. It's a series of attributes that you can add to your website to give additional information about the purpose of the elements you build and what state they have. It also allows the browser accessibility tree to communicate this information via accessibility APIs to a user visiting your website or using your apps. So what is the accessibility tree and how is ARIA information communicated to users? The accessibility tree is very similar to the DOM tree in that it's a series of nodes in a hierarchical structure that represent information on your page. If you're not sure what the DOM tree is, please see the link in the description. There are 4 pieces of information to each node in the tree: a label, a role, for example button, a description, and state. This information is then communicated to assistive technologies via platform-specific accessibility APIs. There are APIs for various languages and technologies, not just browsers. Screen readers are operating system level pieces of software, as their users need them everywhere, not just whilst browsing the internet. For this reason, it is important if you communicate to your users outside of your app or website to make sure that these channels are accessible too. This means emails should be accessible and PDFs should be readable. Not every DOM node needs to be in the tree, but only the information in the tree is actually communicated to users of screen readers. First, see if there's a semantic tag or attribute available that you can use. Many tags already have roles like button, H1, and section. They also have inbuilt semantic meaning and functionality for assistive technologies. Assuming there is no semantic tag available and you need to use ARIA to make a component, you can find examples of different roles on the WCAG Authoring Practices Guide website. This is the first place to go when building new components to make sure they are built in an accessible way, as the APG contains examples of how to build components with different roles, as well as listing any attributes those roles require and their expected keyboard controls. Not every kind of component has a role, but it's still worth looking in the APG first before searching for an article on the component you're trying to make. There is no accordion role, for example, but there is a pattern for an accessible accordion that you can use. The patterns include working samples as well as giving you the HTML, but this is not the only way to build components. Some roles may require certain elements to have a specific structure or have attributes on a specific element, but the overall structure is not defined. This is why if you search for an example of an accessible component, nearly every blog or video on the subject will give a completely different structure and solution. The Mozilla Developer Network has information on all the attributes and roles. Many HTML tags have an implicit role like H1 having the heading role, and it is important not to change this. If you need to change the role, however, the NDN can show you which roles a tag can have. A div, for example, can have any role, but other tags may be more restrictive. There are too many different ARIA attributes to cover here, but some of the more important ones are ARIA label and ARIA label by for setting the accessibility label for a node in the accessibility tree. If you need to hide something from screen readers, you can use ARIA hidden or role presentation. Dynamic content can be announced to screen readers via ARIA Live. This can be useful for things like error messages and notifications. Many other attributes exist to represent state, like the current value on an amount picker or whether an element is disabled. If you want to know more about these or any other attributes, see the links in the description below. First, read about the rules of ARIA and how and when you should be using ARIA. This will not take long as it is just 5 rules which I will be covering in more detail in a future video. As a basic rule of thumb, don't use ARIA if there is a semantic tag available or a semantic attribute. What this means is, if you need a button, use the button tag and don't give a span the role of button. If you need to disable an element, like an input, use the disabled attribute rather than ARIA disabled. Hopefully you now know a bit more about ARIA. what it is, and how you can use it to make your components and websites more accessible. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, please give a thumbs up and subscribe if you'd like to be notified about more videos exploring accessibility.